Hello, everybody. Good turnout. Thank you very much. I've just been meeting with the governor and his staff to talk about my day. I started at the Gamecock Vaccination Center being run by Prisma Healthcare and USC and the National Guard. Governor, I'm very proud of what you're doing. If you want a vaccination, you can get one. It takes about an hour. I've been vaccinated. I would urge everybody in the state to get vaccinated. We need about 70–80% of our population to get to herd immunity so we can go back about our lives and play football safely. So, Governor McMaster, I want to congratulate you and your staff working with the private sector and making the vaccine available to as many South Carolinians as possible. And it takes about an hour, and it'd be well worth your time. So I want to congratulate you on that. The reason I'm here today with the governor is I've been in the House and the Senate for a while now, and I've never been more worried about a piece of legislation than I am HR1. Now, why am I worried? HR1 is an attempt by the radical left to take over every election system in the country. HR1 would be the federalization of elections for Congress. It would be in violation of the Constitution, in my view, but the contents of this bill should scare everybody in South Carolina and throughout the nation who believe in robust voting but integrity at the ballot box. Number one, it does away with voter ID requirements. HR1 would eliminate the ability of any state to require a voter to prove you are who you are. That, to me, is stunning. You can't get on an airplane. You can't go anywhere in this country. You can't apparently do much for Delta and Coca-Cola shareholders. You have to have an ID to go to the shareholder meeting. So it would eliminate voter ID. It would take away from the states the ability to redistrict for congressional purposes. What does that mean to South Carolina? That's a disaster for us. We have 7 members of Congress now because our population in South Carolina is growing. Every few years, you redistrict the House of Representatives based on population growth. Where people are moving out of the deep blue liberal states because of taxes and crime, they're coming to Texas and South Carolina and Florida, and under the laws of the land today, you leave it up to the states with court oversight to draw the new congressional districts. This bill would eliminate that. They would create a federal panel to take away from South Carolina the ability to draw our congressional lines. That's a tremendous infringement on the ability of a state to run its election as envisioned by the Constitution. Ballot harvesting, that becomes the law of the land. What does that mean? It means a third party can collect ballots of other people. They can walk through neighborhoods, walk through community centers, walk through nursing homes, and collect ballots and, in theory, drop them off at the right place. But that is ripe for fraud because if you have the wrong person collecting the ballot, they'll throw some of them in the garbage can. Ballot harvesting, I think, is a threat to democracy as we know it. It allows same-day voter registration, which I think is to be problematic. It requires the federal government to finance campaigns. There's a requirement in this bill that the federal government will provide $6 to every candidate who raises $1 from low-dollar donations. Remember our election? If you're in the TV business, I hope all of you got raises because it's not because they couldn't afford to give you money if they wanted to. I spent $110 million, and Jamie Harrison, I think, was $132. Under this bill, for every low-dollar donation we both received, you'd get $6. You're talking about over $1 billion available to campaign in South Carolina. Who wants to go through that? So all I can say is it's the biggest power grab since I've been in Congress. It will take away every state's ability to run free and fair elections. It will do away with the requirement for voter identification. It will take away the ability of a state to redistrict and send it up to the federal government. It institutionalizes ballot harvesting and requires mail-in voting as the way to go, that you'll get a ballot whether you want one or not. This, to me, is a very serious attempt to alter the balance of power, to centralize in the federal government a voting system that's ripe for fraud at the expense of every American who wants to vote fairly. And with that, I'll turn it over to Governor McMaster.
Thank you, Senator Graham. Thank you for being with us today. Senator Graham is exactly right. And it is really hard to believe what is in this bill that is now passed the House and is in the Senate. And as you know, the votes are 50-50 in the Senate between the two parties. But this bill, HR1, threatens the constitutional sovereignty of the state of South Carolina. Now, those are not just words. That's very important. This country, our state, is built on the sovereignty of the states. This bill takes that away. Like others, I have sworn an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of this state and of the United States. An oath, so help me God. Many of you have taken such an oath. As long as I am serving as governor, I will stand up against those who seek to infringe or deny South Carolinians their constitutionally protected freedoms and liberty. I must say, I've been in and out of politics for a number of years, as has Senator Graham, as have others. I have never seen anything like this. And I know there have been some people that made statements about the Georgia election reform and other things, and they have overstated it. They have erroneously characterized. They have exaggerated some of those provisions that you've seen on television and other places. But there's no way to exaggerate the danger and the harm that these provisions, if passed, will do to our state and our country. It is hard to believe they will eliminate the requirement, any kind of ID requirement other than saying that you are who you say you are. And you can register to vote on the same day as the election. It requires the states to have early voting. I don't mean absentee voting. We have a good process for absentee voting here. You can get your ballot. You can, it'll be mailed to you 30 days in advance. You have to apply for it. You vote, sign it, have a witness, send it back in. It must be received by 7 o'clock on election day. It must be received. This bill throws all of that away. This is the largest invitation to fraud that I can imagine, and I don't know what they're going to come up with next if they get this done. People during the last election, they said, well, we don't need all these requirements because we don't have any voter fraud in South Carolina or other places. Well, when I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office, we prosecuted voter fraud. 30 individuals were convicted. It was in Dillon County. Some of you may remember that. And it all centered around absentee ballots. They were taking absentee ballots, getting them and taking them out, helping the people fill them out. And then they'd do the voting for them or tell them who to vote for. They'd pay them, I think it was a half pint of liquor or $5 was the going price. And that's voter fraud. Loosening the requirements on absentee voting to eliminate the integrity of that is bad enough. But this bill goes even farther. It is hard to believe that this bill has actually passed the House of Representatives of the United States of America. It is hard to believe. So I thank you, Senator Graham, for standing up. I know that there are many of your colleagues there that will stand up against this, and we will certainly support you and stand up here as well. Again, this is not an exaggeration. This is breathtaking in its destruction to the integrity of our election system. Any questions?
Yes, thank you.
Governor, South Carolina has not seen the type of sweeping legislation that was passed into law like in Georgia. I'm wondering, do you feel like the state's election laws need to change that at all? And if so, what is the legislation need to do?
Yeah, I think we need to, Speaker Lucas has a bill in that would require each of the county election offices to operate under the same procedures under the State Election Commission. They ought to be doing that. There was confusion on verifying signatures and a lot of other things. We need to have a consistent system around the state. We need to do that. But one reason we didn't have the problems they had in other states is we went after it when it came up, when there was an effort to remove the witness signature. The absentee ballots, we fought that in court, took it all the way to the Supreme Court and won. I wish other states had done the same thing, had gotten into it earlier, and had been able to push their way through the court system. But this thing, regardless of what we do, what our laws are here, this bill will change everything. I think it is blatantly unconstitutional. It is enormous in its impact, all negative. We want to have a robust, fair, easy, convenient voting, but it must have integrity. Corruption has no place in the election process, much less being invited by a bill in the Congress. It's breathtaking to think of the impact that this will have if it passes. Yes, sir.
Senator Graham, there's a lot of national conversation about whether Senator Joe Manchin would vote on this. I know he's an important vote. What's your sense about where he stands on this?
Well, so that's really good. So here's what's going on from my point of view. They're going after Georgia as being Jim Crow 2.0. Why? They'll be going after Texas next. What they're doing in Georgia is allow you 17 days to vote. Now, you got to have an ID to vote, and if you don't have one, they'll get one for you, including weekends. How are you suppressing people's right to vote when you give them 17 days to vote, including weekends? So the bottom line to me is that they're setting up HR1 for passage by saying that states like Texas and Georgia and maybe South Carolina be next, I don't know, that we have to have a national voting standard because these states like Georgia are suppressing the vote based on along racial lines. So here's what I think. I think that Joe Manchin is not going to turn on the people of West Virginia, because here's his choice. Allow the people of West Virginia to conduct elections, or allow the federal government to take over the election system for every American and impose upon every state like West Virginia insane requirements. No voter ID. So I would imagine that in West Virginia, if you ask the average person, do you believe you should have an ID to prove you are who you are when you vote? It would be overwhelming. I would imagine most West Virginians would want states to draw the lines, not some group in Congress. I am sure that most West Virginians wouldn't like the idea of ballot harvesting, where some partisan person can collect ballots from neighborhoods and other places and turn them in if they want to, and if they don't turn them in. So my view is that I doubt if most West Virginians want the federal government to be on the hook for $6 for every dollar you get through a donation. So I'm hopeful that Joe Manchin will look at HR1 as destroying the ability of West Virginia to conduct an election as they see fit, following the laws of the land. The reason I'm here with Governor McMaster is to let every South Carolinian know why I'm so upset. If you can show me voter abuse where people are not allowed to vote fairly and freely, I want to fix that. I see a political effort to institutionalize voting at the federal level on terms most advantageous to the most radical people in the country. And I'm not going to be part of that, and I'm hoping Joe Manchin will not be. They're trying to change the filibuster for this. They're trying to convince Joe Manchin, just work with us on HR1. Let's change the filibuster for one bill. Why are they picking this? This will destroy ballot integrity. This will institutionalize techniques used by the left to expand the vote in a fashion where there will be no integrity in the vote. This is the biggest power grab in modern American history, being pushed by the most radical people in modern American history to change the way we vote, to destroy the integrity of the ballot box. and we will not stand for it in South Carolina. And I am confident that Joe Manchin will be listening to the people of West Virginia.
Senator Graham, what do you think about HR1's requirement that super PACs disclose their donors publicly?
I'm all for that. Citizens United is your problem. I don't like dark money. I had all the money. Thanks to the generosity of people throughout the country, I was a well-funded candidate. But some of these PACs come out of nowhere. They come into a state, you don't know who's giving the money, they beat the hell out of you and they leave, and you don't know what their agenda is. Count me in for transparency, but you got Citizens United, and I've already talked to Sheldon Whitehouse. I want people to know, where the money's coming from. I believe in transparency. I believe in disclosing your donors. So that's something I could work on.
A recent poll found that the majority of Americans would support same-day voter registration. I recognize that this bill has a lot of layers to it, but do you see anything that's redeeming in it in addition to the dark money? Could you get behind same-day voter registration or any kind of compromises?
To me, I want to make it easy to vote, hard to cheat. I don't want to have an influx on voting is a sacred right, but it's also a sacred process. I'd rather leave it up to the state of South Carolina. Why should we be mandating that? I mean, if it's working in a state and they like it, great. If Henry and the people of South Carolina don't want to go down that road, great too. For me, I'd like people to get registered, make it easy to be registered, but be on the books when you show up. They'll see your name, you show an ID, and you vote. I don't mind voting by mail, but I don't want to mail people ballots who don't request them. What happens to all these ballots in apartment complexes laying around when people move? The idea of ballot harvesting offends the hell out of me, that some person with a partisan edge can go through a neighborhood and collect people's ballots, help them fill it out, and turn it in if they want to, and if they don't, they don't. These are terrible ideas. It's same-day voting. I'd leave it up to people of South Carolina.
We actually had, in the last election, I know two people called me saying they'd moved from other states 20 or 30 years ago. They hadn't been citizens here, voting, everything else, buying houses, raising children, and yet they got multiple ballots from those states asking them to vote. It's easy for these things to get out of hand. When you have people, the stakes are high, and people will do things that they shouldn't do. And there's no reason on earth to do what H1 is asking. It would make all of that easier. Voting needs to be completely free of corruption. It needs to have integrity. We need to have confidence in the system, and HR1 would destroy that.
Governor, you've expressed support for Speaker Lucas's bill in the House. What do you think about the bill in the Senate that aims to restructure the State Election Commission?
Don't think that's necessary. I think that's a bad idea. It doesn't make sense to me. It looks like a power grab there for no reason. But Speaker Lucas's bill is superb. Needs to be done. Every county election office ought to have the same rules, ought to operate by the same safe procedures, prescribed procedures, and there shouldn't be a question about how do you check a signature, well, how do you verify this, how do you do that? Those sorts of questions don't even need to be asked. Yes, sir.
Has there been a meeting of House Senate leadership along with you to discuss ways compromise?
Not compromise. We've discussed it with the Speaker, and we've made our views known to the Senate.
As far as the elections director, there's been a lot of frustration from State House leaders about how she handled the letters last year, the lawsuits, and I'm wondering whether you have confidence in the state elections director.
Well, I think those letters were very unfortunate. I know their conversations have been going on about that since then and are continuing.
Do you have confidence in her ability?
Well, I think there are conversations going on among various parties about the Election Commission in general and things you mentioned in particular.
And Senator Graham, you've mentioned in the past, especially after January 6th, that Joe Biden is in the White House right now. He is the standing president. There are still some South Carolinians who do question federal elections. To that, what do you say? And to anything that there was actually not only people that were supporters of then President Trump who were there on January 6th?
Well, number one, I voted to certify the election results. Under our Constitution, the role of the Congress is to basically to count the electoral votes certified by the states. When there's a conflict in a state electoral, when you have two sets that are contrary to each other, then Congress has a role trying to figure it out. But I voted to certify the election results in Georgia. Having said that, the consent decree, where you really didn't have to have a signature before you applied for the ballot, was problematic. They have signature verification problems in Georgia that were obvious to me, but they went to court, and the system worked, and Joe Biden won the election. What I'm worried about is 2022. I'm worried about this becoming law. If this becomes law, you're going to undermine the integrity of the ballot box to where it will be hard to convince the average American this is on the up and up. Because the average American, regardless of party, believes you should be able to prove you are who you are. The first thing in this bill that just bowls me over is that there's no longer a requirement for voter ID. It'd be illegal to do it. What does redistricting have to do with voting integrity? That's a power grab. What does a 6-to-1 money match have to do with voting integrity? Act Blue raises a lot more money than the Republicans can raise on the Democratic side, so they're trying to take the advantage they have through these small dollar donors and leverage it through the federal law. What does ballot harvesting have to do with improving integrity at the ballot box? It's a way to gather people's votes in a system that I think is very nefarious. So this is a power grab. This is not about making it easier to vote. This is not about anything other than trying to consolidate power on terms most advantageous to the liberal left. We're not going to put up for it up with it in South Carolina. And I hope Joe Manchin will hang tough, because Senator Manchin represents one of the most conservative states in the union. And I can't believe that people in West Virginia would put up with this. I can tell you, having been all over the state, people in South Carolina are just shocked that the federal government would even be contemplating this. Not only are we contemplating it, we're 1 or 2 votes away, Henry, from this happening. They're willing to change the filibuster rule, which I have opposed changing. We had the House, we had the Senate, we had the White House. President Trump was tweeting every day against me and McConnell, change the filibuster rule so we can pass anything we want as Republicans. Well, I said no, because the Senate's different. It ought to be a place to slow things down, to build a bipartisan consensus. 27 Democrats, Governor, signed a letter with me to Mitch McConnell and Senator Schumer when we were in charge of everything, urging us as Republicans not to change the filibuster rule. I signed that letter. There were 61 of us. Those same people, where are they now? Sounds a lot like me voting for their judges and they destroying Kavanaugh. Well, I'm pretty tired of that. So all these Democrats that were urging us to maintain the integrity of the Senate are now willing to change the rules for this one bill. They understand that they can pass HR1. It would be the biggest change in the way we vote, beneficial to the radical left in the history of the country. And I'm hoping that a few senators on the other side will not play this game. And I'm hoping that the State House will urge the delegation not to be part of passing HR1.
2 more questions if there are.
The voter ID requirement you keep talking about, it doesn't ban states from requiring it. It just says that they have to also let voters, if they don't have ID, sign sworn affidavits under oath, testifying.
Oh, what's possibly could happen with that? This is a joke. The reason they're trying to stop, I am willing, and I'm sure Henry would be too. If you don't have a driver's, we'll give everybody an ID. I don't want to put a burden on anybody. If you don't have an ID, we will get you one so you can vote. So this is eroding the voter identification requirement. What's wrong with asking people to have an ID to prove you are who you are when you vote? You have to have it when you go to the airport. And Democrats are talking about a vaccine passport. They're wanting you to have a document to prove you've had a vaccine to be able to conduct business in the country and to travel, but they don't want you to be able to prove you are who you are. So it's pretty obvious to me this is not about voter integrity, it's about power grab.
Last question right here.
Could you explain the ramping up cancel culture bullet point?
No, I don't know that one. I'll read that one, yeah. I think that's got a lot to do with Georgia. Yeah, I don't know. That's one of the 12 things they gave me I didn't mention. I don't even know what it means myself. But I don't need to get past voter ID. I don't need to get past redistricting and ballot harvesting. Those are the guts of this thing. Taking away the power of the states to draw the state lines is devastatingly bad for South Carolina because we're growing. Doing away with voter ID is bad for the integrity of the ballot box. And mail-in voting on a mass scale where you get the ballot where you want it or not is ripe for fraud, and ballot harvesting is just an absolute nightmare. And I don't like the idea of a 6-to-1 federal government match for every dollar you raise as a candidate. That's enough for me.
Thank you, everyone. One more question.
For both of y'all, Southern Poverty Law Center says HR1 would roll back discriminatory practices that have harmed voters and citizens of colors for decades.
That is nonsense. That's nonsense. This is dangerous. It will destroy the system of elections. If there's anyone out there who does not want Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to be in charge of their lives, then you don't want to support this. If this passes into law, just to put a face on it, you will have those two individuals and those who think just like they do, and the rest of the radicals will be in charge of your lives. Because the people that will get elected are the people who will be agreeing with them.
If I could just put a fine point on it. You know, I voted for criminal justice reform, the First Step Act. There are a lot of African American and Hispanic men who've been put in jail for a very long time because of 3 strikes and outlaw. If there are certain parts of this country, your chance to encounter the cops is greater than other places. Your economic situation has a lot to do with whether or not you're going to be exposed to crime. That's just a fact. I'd like to change systems. I was working with Senator Scott to do something about police reform. At the end of the day, they're calling all of us racist because we won't give in to this power grab. They play the race card morning, noon, and night. I am tired of it. I think it's cheap. I think it's sick for the President of the United States, Joe Biden, who's been a friend for years, to say that what they're doing in Georgia is Jim Crow 2.0. Some of you have got families that lived through Jim Crow, where people were beaten, deterred from voting, poll taxes, literacy test, institutional efforts to keep black people from voting. The highest voter participation in the country in the last election. And I'm proud of that. I want every eligible voter to be able to vote, but I want you to do it in a way that we have confidence in the results. So playing the race card is not going to work here. To Major League Baseball, you don't know what you're talking about. You're moving the All-Star game that has less voting opportunities in Colorado than they will in Georgia. This is not going to work. Our friends in Georgia are revamping their voting system in a way that makes sense to me, requiring a voter identification even if you do mail-in balloting. Bottom line here, folks, this is an effort by the left to paint any opposition, Southern Poverty Law Center included, to HR1 to equate that you're a racist. It is not going to work. This is 2021. Count me in for robust voting. Count me in for everybody being able to vote, but I want to make sure they do it without cheating. And that's what this is about.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.